Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to today's stream. Today is September 15th, and I actually remember that in my head. So, improvements. Welcome for everybody joining. I see Sanity's Guardian. Excited for the new content, as are we, as am I. So, today we are going to have something fun, something new, something exciting. I would like to, without further ado, introduce Greg. Yay, Greg! Greg is development for Antihero, and I'll let him take it away.
Hello, everybody. For those who don't know or haven't seen the last couple of streams, I'm the lead developer on Lord of the Rings adventure card game at Antihero. So Sarah had talked a few weeks back that she had asked the community for some ideas about what to do for streams. And one of those was to talk a little bit more about the dev side of the house. So I'm going to walk you through today how we go about creating locations. I'm kind of behind the scenes about the 3D locations that you see in the game behind the cards. So for each location that you travel to in the game, there's a unique set piece, if you will, almost like a play stage that we use for the game. And so I thought I might, maybe you guys might find it exciting, maybe not, to show you some of the work that goes on behind that. So you just want to get rolling, Sarah, or?
Yeah, I have the link that you had sent to, so that should be in the various doobly-doos, as I refer to them. And then if they're not available for people directly, I'll make sure that they're on Discord and Facebook afterwards.
Okay, so those are basically, if you played through Campaign 3, we're going to walk through some of those environments today. And those are actually desktops that you can get, you can download. We basically created 2K versions and 4K renders of the location scenes for Campaign 3. And so you can download those for desktops or your viewing pleasure. Okay, so let me go ahead and turn on my screen share. Now, just a second. Make sure all hidden important information is closed.
Hi to those joining. Our favorites, Aaron, Board Game Dude, Engage, Toads all on Twitch, and of course Octavian on YouTube. Welcome. Thank you for joining.
Okay, I think we are sanitized. So here we go. Okay, so typically the way that this works, so for those who don't know, Campaign 3 was built at Fantasy Flight Interactive, the previous studio that was responsible for the game, who shut down in February. And so I was art director there for Gundabad, starting with Gundabad through Campaign 3. So I'm going to show you a little bit about my process of how I went about building those locations, so you can kind of see the process that we go through. So what was interesting about Campaign 3, hopefully everybody who's watching us played through it, is it was the first place that we used interior locations. And so when I first joined the team, some of the things that I was interested in doing was exploring more interior spaces. For those who don't know, let me show you. Typically in the game, so this is the 3D application called Blender. This is what we build the scenes in. And this is the game frame that you'll typically see in every one of the locations. So this is what we start with when we start a location. So previously, all of the locations in Campaign 1, Campaign 2, and the encounters were all exterior locations. And so what I wanted to try to play with was a little bit of scale. I wanted to try to see if I could push things to a larger scale or a smaller scale to see, just to explore the space, maybe put some little more interest in the game. One thing that we're always considerate of is to make sure that the main focus is what you're seeing when you're playing cards. That's your, the actual card play that's in front of you. We don't want the locations to be a distraction to you. But we want it to feel more like you're going on this journey, and every time you press travel on the board, that you see a new location that you're going to. So Campaign 3 had, quite a mix of locations that we had. It was going to go to Bree. It was going to start in Bree. It was going to go to Fornost. It was going to go to, several different areas around Bree. And so I'll walk you through some of that. But basically, I get a design brief when it comes to me about where these locations are going to be. And so, for example, we had Bree was the first one that came up. So Bree was the first town that we were going to do, and it was a chance for me to explore just some ideas. So when I first get the brief, basically I'll do two things. I'll look in the Atlas for Middle Earth, which is by what's her name, Karen Fonstadt. It's a book that's easily available for everybody out there, but it kind of gives an actual mapping of Middle Earth and the different locations in Middle Earth, and it pulls those details from the book because you want to try to be as authentic as you can. Because our license doesn't cover anything, we can't use anything from the films. We have to use only stuff from the book. We're coming up with these visual ideas and visual cues on our own. So at that point, Tim Garrison was in charge of the studio, and he basically gave me a design brief, which has kind of the narrative outline and locations of where we're going to be traveling in the card play. And so the first thing that I do is I just kind of go to Google Images, and I try to find some images and put together what we call a mood board. And so this mood board is basically, if you could think of, okay, real world examples that we could, kind of use in these different locations. So I'm looking for all different kinds of things, materials, framing, types of homes. Like this specifically, I was looking at types of roofs that we could use. So because Bree was going to be an outdoor location, the town itself, we were going to see a lot of things from the air. One interesting thing is if I show you the actual camera view of the game, this is the camera view of the game. So you see a lot of the cool things that you might want to show, it's like, oh, I want to show some elevations, and I could show the sky and the time of day. You can't really do that on this frame. So it's our one constraint that we have to build against. And so obviously if we're outdoor in Bree, we're going to see some of the roof tiles, right? And so it was kind of looking at some old Tudor style houses and trying to figure out what is the style for Bree, right? And so you're looking at two things, like what it is and what it isn't. And so I found a couple of references. Let's see if they're in here. Like this thatched roof. It was kind of this storybook kind of Swiss looking style. But we decided, no, that was not it. It was more of the Tudor style, this kind of feeling. With, what we're looking at is not necessarily I want to recreate this house. It's the design language, like this lantern. Is interesting. These way that these wood beams and planks fit, on the wall. So these are things that we're looking at, to try to pull and try to understand what is Bree in our language. So basically, we go out there and we do this for each location. So this was Ramshackle Manor. Before it was run down, what might it have looked like? Some notes that I'm taking, and this app is called Pure Ref. I think it's free. It's just something you can throw a bunch of images in, and then we can kind of all sit around and talk about them. We had a couple storehouses. I'm looking at materials like rope, wood, because it's going to take up the majority of the frame. I'm also looking at lighting, different types of props. When you look at how many times people have looked at the Prancing Pony, like that's probably one of the most nostalgic locations in Lord of the Rings, right? So you always think about the inn and what happens there and what does it actually look like. I think it's actually, supposedly shaped like you into a mountainside with kind of an open area with stables in the middle. And then you have kind of two entrances off either side. So it was kind of an interesting idea, like, hey, yeah, so we looked at, okay, what did they make for the movie? We can't use any of it. But, where were they going direction-wise? Stables, we have a scene with some stables. So, what are some interesting things that say stable as you put them in here? And then we go to the Barrow Downs. And so it's kind of thinking about what are some motifs or ideas that we could use. And again, you're just kind of going out there and just fishing, really. You're not going to really use any of these images. You're just trying to get something that feels the right way or kind of has, some interesting looks, maybe things, have buried in dirt, small openings of light, those kind of things is what you're really looking for. So this is kind of an influence board more than it is like, oh, we're actually going to pull textures out of this. It's like, what does it, what do the door frames look like? Should they be straight? Should they be leaning? we go to Fornost, which was, a pretty major location really in the lore. I mean, it's not covered a ton in the book, but this was the Northern Kingdom, prior to being taken over by the Witch King or destroyed. This had to look different than Minas Tirith, right, in the south. In Gondor, you wanted the two to have this different stylistic look. So it's kind of like, how do you find a castle that's run down, and then that castle is overgrown completely because it's been there for hundreds of years and nobody's used it. And so these are the kind of I guess the first stage of art direction that you'll go through, and then you pull these, and Tim and I would sit down and we would say, okay, how does this feel? Like, I think he wanted to go away from the overgrown look, and we eventually came back to some of this just to try to make it look older.
So there's a question that came up from Board Game Dude. He said, you aren't allowed to use the movies, but do you ever look to them for reference? Not to rip off, but because they are a visual medium, it seems they could be a nice launching points. Obviously, they aren't always true to the books themselves.
Yeah, it's... I wouldn't say that I use the movies, but I have all of the art books that go along with them, because you're kind of looking at the interest behind them, especially like the Hobbit ones were really useful, kind of how they went in and they, dove deep on the characters, the materials that they were using, the cloth and the fabric, those kind of things for inspiration. But it's really hard to get it out of your brain. Like, I've seen the movies now so many times that, it's just, it's ingrained in your brain of what things look like. And so you kind of have to work past that. But yeah, I think that's just kind of, for me, like, that's just always back there. But it's also interesting to come back, like, for example, the gate at Bree, when you look in the movie, of how they come into Bree, it's kind of like, a different entryway than what we put in the game, and it was kind of to do with staging, time of day, lighting. I think it's raining in the movie. But yeah, I think it's just popular culture. That's what's in your mind, even more so than when you read the book before. Like, I think when I started doing this research for the Prancing Pony, it's like, when I hit this image here, started doing this research, it's like, those aren't things that you've seen before. The Prancing Pony, right, in the movie, and you don't get to see really much of the pony in the movie at all. So you're trying to create what is your version of that, and still stay true to the original material. There's even some early, I don't know if I have them in here. Yeah, this is one of an early painting. I think it was done for a calendar. I'm not sure, but Tolkien was very he was very particular about how the lanterns and the roof beams should look in this painting. And so you're just kind of trying to go back and find as many things as you can, pipe smoke. And this is just first level, right? So a lot of this won't make it into the game, obviously, because we are constrained by these. Like, we basically have these lanes over here, and if you look at the players' cards go here, right? The players' cameos are here, the enemy cameos are here, and then the enemy cards are here. And if it's multiplayer, then you have to leave this open for the second player as well. So you really have to, use this space wisely to try to pull off what you're trying to do. Second point that's really important is that, I don't know what that's like the 32nd point, but if you look at the way that the walls, this little outline of the wire, this is the extreme perspective that we have. And so you'll see when I show you some of the buildings in Bree, where it might look like from this location, the walls are straight up. When you actually build it, the walls have to be built at this extreme location. So it makes it really hard when you have to do a wall joint, trying to connect it down and actually build it to this perspective. So this is really the first stage. So once we get through that stage, this kind of gives us maybe a prop list. You might pull, okay, I'm gonna have some chairs, some jugs, some loaves of bread. So you create a prop list for all of this, and you put it into a, let's see here, you put it into a workbook. Right, so don't worry about the words. This is just something I threw together, because a lot of times you have contractors that will be working with you. You have the rest of the team that you need to talk to, and this is kind of the workbook, is what I call it. So this is what gets the team on the same direction. Once I've gone through, I pick the key images that we need. Then I put together this quick workbook, and so I'll just kind of walk through what this looks like. So a big part of the game. See if I can zoom in here so you guys can see this. A big part of the game is that floor, right? Is the floor here. So we always see what the floor is going to look like. So I always consider that like 80% of the view. So the character of wherever you're going to be has to really be spelled out in the material that you use for the floor. So when I first started planning out this map, if I will, like, okay, here's the things that are going to have, we got a campsite, stables, so we kind of need this like rocky soil. If we're in a city, like, okay, what is the city paved with as far as the streets at that time? If we're in an interior for Brie, and these are just materials I pulled, and I'll show you kind of, how those tie into the final product. Here's the barrows, here's, interior barrows, like what does it look like inside the tombs, fornost when you're on the outside, and then interior fornost when you're under the castle. And so if you were to look at this from a high level picture, this can kind of give everybody, okay, here is the path of the game that players are going to see. 80% of the path will be these, right? And we had, I think it was 27 locations for this normally prior to this, I think they had around 8. And so we blew it out to just say, okay, I just want to see what we can do. Like, they brought me as an art director. Let's see what we can do for campaign 3 that's different than anything we've done before. Sure.
A couple questions for you, Greg. So the first one is, will you be able to discuss any of the new content campaigns that are coming out for the game?
Maybe when we get to the end, I might show one of them, but I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how this goes.
Everybody's nice. And then the other question was, with the debulking of the cards, has there been any consideration to debulking the main stage pedestal, opening up your design space a bit more?
Yes, for sure. I hope to completely get rid of this frame. Really, when you look at it, what we use is we only really use the resource locations. Especially now in the newest DLC, we only have 2 of them. So you use this space, you use this bottom right where your travel button and end phase button is, and then you have Sauron's resources. So the rest of this, we've utilized a lot more. And so you often have this like silver game board in the middle of stuff that maybe doesn't have to necessarily be there, and even then we'd like to lay the card decks flat. There's a lot that we would like to do, and we certainly would like to give ourselves more space, because that frees up a lot of extra things that we can access. So yes, to answer your second question, yes. To answer your first question, maybe. We'll see how this goes. Okay, so once I get through this, I put this workbook together. So here's kind of the final selected images. You also see in here the card art. Sometimes the card game, we pull images from there to see like what was the artist's intent. And it's really interesting to me because like I don't know what art direction they give to the remote artists when they create card art. Just kind of like go make some stuff. And so when you're trying to rectify that with the book and what's going on in your own vision, I just like to have that there to know, like, this is what fans know of this card or this location. Here's kind of some of the final ideas that we picked for the pony. Again, here's like the card art that we had. I don't know if you guys can see that. Pretty small. This is what existed. Right, for the pony, like exterior location. So we're not tied to that. We can kind of do what we want, which is pretty cool. Some alley shots. Let's see. Campsite, again, there was like 27 locations. So I'll just kind of skip through this. But this is kind of what we work from as a team. So as I'm working with an external contractor, I can just kind of say, hey, this is what we're thinking for the barrow downs. Here's your material guide. Stick to that and just, kind of come up with what you can. And we worked with 2 contractors on this one. Eva Ivanova, and there's the second one that's skipping my mind. Josephine Allen, 2 external contractors I worked with. So once I did the initial blockouts, then I sent it to them for detailing to finalize. They did a great job. Okay, so the second part of this, besides our images, are what we called our build kits. And once we have kind of all the images, we basically go find models or build models or everything that we would need to build a town or a city or barrows. And then we get that blocked out so that we can quickly start framing in what we see as our scenes. And so this details some of the build kits. I'll show you some of these in a minute. This is for the barrow downs. And like some of these will be on the asset store. Some of these we just create a bunch of quick rocks. But basically, we're going to reuse these assets to create the scenes. And there's a couple reasons for that. One, so that everything that you build has the same feeling, no matter if you build it individually, how you see it. It's all textured the same. It all looks the same. It looks like it's from the same place. And you can also, it's more efficient in the game if you're building from the same kit in several ways. This is our nature kit. It's just kind of a way to block in quick nature scenes. Okay, and then from here, so let's see, do I have one of these kits up that I can show you? Yeah. So this is the village kit. You can zoom in here a little bit more. And so basically, this is what we give to our artists, and they just have all these pieces. So think of it almost like Legos. So the pieces are already set up, they're already textured. And I'll show you how we do that in a second. But basically, if I was to give this to you, you can just put it in a 3D scene and you can start building, you know, so we have facades of the buildings. Those pictures that we saw, we just put those in there, and then we can add these different pieces of wood to the front, and some can be crooked. There's different window sets that we can use, and these are all set up already. So we can just give you the kit, give you some images, you know, maybe some sketches to go off of, and then you can just go crazy building, you know, weapons, however you want. So this is what the first level of kits that I built out for each location. And this is just kind of previz that you give to, in this case, Tim, and I think this also went to licensing, just kind of what are we thinking? And you can see here the limitations we're still at. But this is kind of an early lighting previz for, okay, what might Bree look like, you know, if we're outside of the pony, or, you know, we have these different locations, city square, what might they look like? You know, and here is a shot of the inside of the inn. And these are very, you know, early explorations. You can see here the inner image has the windows coming from the side. In the pony, it talks about it has these windows in the front of it. So the original thought was like, oh, okay, they should come from down here and then, you know, shine in. So maybe it's a night scene, maybe you can't see it. So these are just some different ideas that we explored. Here's the village market. Again, like these are all just built from those pops. And I'll show you what some of these, this was the gate, pre-gate. And here's the stables. And I'll just show you a quick version of this. So this is the actual stable scene. And here's what it is built out of. Just a couple pieces. An interesting thing is we eventually use, like this was the early block out. So you can see when I look at it from the camera view, everything looks like it's built, right? And this is the early preview, which we would later build out. Okay, I have this one up in Unity. Okay, so here it is in the game. We use Unity Game Engine to build our game. And so when I bring in the actual assets that we built, so this is what the textured assets look like. Again, I'll walk you through this a little bit. You can see this is what it looks like besides what you're playing. So if I look at it in the game view, you see it from this view, right? So it looks like there's an entire, you know, whatever stable built here. And we just kind of have pieces. So ruining the magic for you here. But the lighting that we needed, like these again were kit pieces. We just used them to cast the right shadows that we need, so it gave the impression that there's a shadow, you know, coming through a broken roof. Then we got a horse, I think, in the corner somewhere over here. Yeah. I don't know if you can see that. Most people miss the horse over there in the stall. And then we have decals. So we throw decals on top of here because, like, if it all goes in and it's not dirty or it doesn't have specific things, like this is a specific water one. Here. And then the last magic trick is to do a post-processing, which is kind of like a color grading, or you're adjusting the light to trying to get the final mood. And this is like we put a bloom on the lights, there will be a little bit shinier. And so that's the scene when we finally get it through, right? So that went from these kit pieces here. And the step that we missed was texturing. So basically, if I turn on the textured viewport for this, just a second. Now you can see all of these pieces are textured, right? They're either made out of wood or straw or, you know, whatever. So as you enter them into your scene, or as the artist pastes them in, they're already built out in this, you know, kind of asset. So they're very simple assets. Like you can see if I do a wireframe, there's not much to these. Oh gosh, I'm going to chug it now. I have like six versions of these going. Maybe I'll let me escape. Okay. So this is the wireframe. So there's not much detail. So like this isn't a super high poly because like we still need the card game to run right at 60 frames per second at 4K across the build, right? So one of the ways that we do this is we use what's called an atlas texture. And so this is what I mean by an atlas texture. Okay, so all of these they're mapped to a specific, let's see, show you here. This is what we have. We have this kind of, we call it an atlas. And so every material that's used in your scene, whether it's wood, burlap, shingled roof, stone, you know, they're basically all on this big atlas. And what I have is every one of these are mapped to a different point of the atlas. You know, let's say, so if this is metal, right? All the metal will be, you know, onto the metal part. Let's see if I can get it to show up here. So you can see here, the metal is mapped to these two different zones. And this one, being wood, is all mapped over here to the wood section. So the reason why the different sizes are here is because whichever ones appear the most in your scene or the longest run, let's say we have a lot of these wood pieces that are super long, they'll fit on the atlas here. You know, like if I was supposed to select this, you know, it might be longer and it needed a longer texture run than say something that's smaller like dirt or something like that. So by atlasing these textures, all of these props that are part of this kit share only one texture. And because this is a 4K texture, but in a game, this really affects your performance of how many different materials you're loading and how many different textures. So by building these kits, we really optimize down the resources that's needed. So we run on Switch, like we run on a bunch of different platforms, and they're not all super beefy. So we need the build to run extremely efficient. So yeah, let's say one more thing I did want to talk about is how we come up with the textures. So this is Alchemy, substance, I think it's called Alchemy, Alchemist maybe. And this is how we generate these atlas squares. So we come in here, we look at our reference and we say, okay, you know, what do we have for wood? This is just an example. You know, we can look at the wood in here, you know, basically is lit like real wood. It has 4 different maps. You can see here on the right, we have a color map. We have a normal map, which kind of contains details about the surface. These really small, you know, think of it almost like a push out from the surface. We have roughness, right, which is basically like how shiny or dull is it. And there's a couple in here. Height map is how far it pushes off the surface. And you can see there it kind of pushes out so that it looks like wood. And ambient inclusion is kind of like the shadow, these dark areas that kind of have these cracks and hidden. So we can map these to any, we have a bunch of these different materials that we came up with. But the nice part about this app is like you can just not just create wood. Let's say, you know, it was snowy. So we want to add, you know, a level of snow to the scene. Right, so then we can add in snow. Right, or we could say not just snow, we could say we want to add in some dirt. Let's say this is going to be outside when we see it. So there's these different filters that you can use. We'll just use dust. And then you'll see like it becomes a little bit dusty. And like you can say, I want a lot of dust, heavy dust, you know, I want a bunch of noise. And so there's different filters you can use. You can see like what it looks like, you know, without it. You know, it might be a little bit bland wood, but you can kind of add these different, there's one in here that's dirt that we use a lot. So dirt kind of puts some grime in it, you know, so you get some griminess, a little bit of wear. Obviously, if you've had a barrel that's been outside, it kind of needs this, you know, this wear and tear. And so once we generate these out, we kind of decide, okay, what that material is going to look like. Then we can take these and put this square into our atlas here, and then we can map that across the wood. So we could have one of these for snow, and we could change the entire scene out and just have everything look like it has snow on it at that point. So these are some of the optimizations that we do behind the scenes. So yeah, so then once we get it there, we put it in the atlas. Let me show you the Fornos kit here. So here's some of the statues that we built, right? And so here they look pretty plain, but then when you get them into the scene and you get lighting on them and you throw some decals on there, Let me come back to the engine and show you. Let's see. Here, let's load another one of these things. Go ahead, sir.
Couple more questions. Board Game Dude had asked, does this limit your ability to run on mobile? And I'm guessing he's referring to the efficiency that you were talking about, the smaller polys and all of that kind of thing.
Yeah, so a lot of the work that we did, so that's why it took us so long. Like I think I got to FFI in April, and we didn't ship campaign 3 until end of that year. So I think when they brought Devin and I in as developers, our job was to optimize the scene to run on consoles, right? And so Switch is basically an Android phone. When you look at its performance capabilities of what it can do and what you have to do to get the build to run. So this was a PC only game at the time. So most of our work was going through and optimizing the game to run on that type of a platform. So now that's not saying we don't have to do some work if we do decide to go to mobile eventually. There will be some work, but the majority of that work was done in that time frame, that 6 months that Devin and I spent trying to get things up and running on the Switch. And like we get a lot of comments, like obviously the text size, you'll know when you're building, anyone who's built for consoles, like you can build for a console and then you ship on PC, or you can build for a PC and ship on console. It's kind of like if your game isn't made for that platform, you have some trade-offs to make, right? Obviously the Switch screen is super small. Input is normally a problem. When you're trying to figure out mapping between, does this feel natural? Text size is a problem, especially in the text-heavy card game. So part of the redesign, the future redesign that we're looking at, it won't be in this first batch, but when we're looking at going to different platforms, it will be looking at how to better optimize for those platforms. But it was a miracle to get this game ported over and running across 3 consoles at the same time. So yeah, there'll still be some work to do for mobile, but we did a lot of that optimization, and part of that is what you're seeing here, so that you can still get this really nice looking scene, but it's highly optimized on the back end. And luckily, we don't have a lot of really heavy, difficult gameplay. It's card play, some effects play, that's running in the AI engine at the same time. So we can get away with things like effects. We don't see our effects like frame hitching if a card is played, so it's still the game runs quite well, even at above 60 FPS at 4K, and it runs quite well on the Switch. There's some scenes like the waterfall scene, which was super heavy, that probably could have been optimized a little better. But yeah, hopefully that answers that question.
Another question came in more, I guess, game design related. How was it designing the cards? Trying to make sure that they were balanced and not over or underpowered.
That's probably a future question. Like I can answer the DLC questions, was nobody's seen yet. But most of that was handled by Tim and Alex and Tim and James. So it was basically they sat down in meetings and just played the ton of the game and listen to user feedback and put in there what they felt was right. But I think that's probably a better talk for when we have Tim on to go through the details there. Let's see, I'm just going to load up a couple of these real quick so people can see them. We can talk about some of the challenges we had. Here you can see the decals. So like this is how we would break up the surface. Let me turn off the lighting. So this is what it looks like before you have lighting. But you can see there's decals in here that we add. And that's because they're going to be baked in here, so you won't see them when I turn them off. But that's because we put them in here to, we break up the surface. So you might not notice that, but you might get it might just seem like bare wood and boring. But by adding these decals on here, we can add a little bit more kind of shine or dirt or dust, to help break up some of these shapes where you might notice a big run if we hadn't have done that. So this might all just be kind of boring wood. So we just throw like a spill or a dirt texture on there or whatever to try to break up those atlas shapes a little more. It's one of the negatives about atlasing, but there's so many positives you can usually cover those up. And I'll just run through a couple of these so people can see. This is what I was talking about, having to build on the angle. So normally when you see it from the game, like you're like, oh yeah, okay, that totally sits right. But then when you're trying to build it, you're just like, and these are all built from kits, right? So you can kind of see how these pieces are, put together. As long as it looks good from the front, the back doesn't really matter. But again, it's like, the textures, they all show up really nice. Let's see. Bill Fernie's house. Go ahead. You got a question?
Another question. If one buys the soundtrack on Steam, who gets the profits?
Good question. I don't know that. That'd be an Asmodee question. I don't know. It is a fantastic soundtrack, so really, really good. One of the challenges here was long grass. So like typically in a game, when you make grass, you can simply make it like this because you're not seeing it from above, so you can do whatever you want. Our game is, because it sits at this like 40-degree angle, it's very hard to get these really long grass. The corn worked out really well. These are just flat planes. You can see them from the sides, and they're mapped with a normal texture. And so you can see like the tricks break when you don't do them from a certain angle. But yeah, long grass was very difficult in this one. And we're doing some new things to fix that in the new DLC. We have a new way of doing it. Let's look at some maybe older stuff. Sorry, here I'm just going to kind of grab a couple of these scenes. This is Downward Stare. This is probably one of my favorite ones that we did. And again, this was new, thinking about how we can push under the frame and extend down. So there's a lot of discussions about previously the cards or the cameos sat flat on the ground. And you were building like this theater. And so here we had to do this thing that was a long stair. And how do we do a long stair so that you see it as a long stair? And, so we eventually came up with this idea of pushing into the floor. And there was some mixed, some people liked it. Some people didn't like their cameos floating. But yeah, this is, again, all still kit pieces. We just built this really long stair and some atmospheric fog and some lighting. And we threw in some of the statues here. A few cobwebs, cobweb mats to some planes. Yeah, so we call it Downward Stare. This was Josephine's. I really like this one. Here's the infamous waterfall. This was pretty much impossible to do. We'll see if it will load. Yeah, I'll have to play it, and that's a terrible idea. But yeah, basically there's water at the bottom, and there's this big waterfall that falls from the side. And the effect was, basically impossible to get working, which we did. And it still chugs a little bit in some locations, and built this rope bridge. But yeah, the waterfall has to fall from here. And again, you're trying to avoid, right, the preparation area. You're trying to avoid anywhere that the player has cards, so you're kind of limited in what you can do. And again, we pushed through the floor here just for some ideas. We use that quite a few times, I think. Fallen Crypt. Let's see, there's a couple. Dig Site was one of my favorite ones. So this is Barrow Downs. And this was, again, playing. Oh, wait, no, this wasn't the right one. So this is the grass that we have to try to pull off. Grass is really hard. And there's hardly nothing to this scene. It's like you look at just like some rocks and some stuff thrown in there and some fancy lighting and fog. But when you look at it, it's kind of, the dig site. It's a Prince's Barrow. Let's see. That's a good one. So this actually came from the reference idea of covering everything in dirt, right? So we just applied one texture to pretty much everything, and it had kind of this cool effect of where it just covered over everything. It kind of stinks because you can't do like cool framing shots that you might normally do just because we're locked by the perspective of the camera. But yeah, so yeah, it kind of worked out. Like originally we had everything that was kind of textured in its own way, and they were like, no, this would all be covered with dust. So we just threw the dust texture on everything except for the new stuff. So the story here is that, not to spoil anything, but people have come in here and dug into this ancient site. And so the idea is anything new that they brought in would be, like a newer texture, but everything else should be totally covered in spider webs and dirt. So yeah, let's see. So
another question is, are there any locations that Mirror of Galadriel won't use as a background?
Yes, there are. And we're working on that. Like, there's even some cards that Mirror uses that shouldn't. Some of the players have picked that out. And it's the idea of that there is a surprise location in campaign 3 for people who have played it and found it. And the actual enemy in that location sometimes shows up in Mirror. And so what happens if you discover it, it will actually show you that you've seen that enemy when you actually look at your decks for the game itself. And so we had some discussion about that, of whether that was originally meant to be done, which I don't think it was. But, does that, if you know that there's a specific villain that you haven't met in campaign 3 and suddenly you find it because it showed up somewhere else, that might lead you to investigate how to get there in campaign 3. So I don't know, we've kind of gone back and forth of whether we should eliminate some stuff from Mirror, but Mirror definitely has things that it holds out from building. For those who don't know, Mirror is a kind of procedurally generated play mode, and so it's quick. The idea originally was built, Devin built it for just testing decks, quickly test the deck against a boss. How does it work together? And then we just started playing it more at the studio, and we decided to ship it with campaign 3. Obviously, there's a bunch more stuff that we would like to do with it, but it pulls bosses and assets from other places in the game. But we'd like to, maybe do some unique things, unique bosses that only appear in Mirror, but there's definitely a flag that we can choose it not to appear in Mirror or not. It's just whether some of those have it set incorrectly and whether we keep it that way or not, who knows. So I think that's pretty much all that I wanted to share. And that's just a high level. I think it's probably not a good idea, until I get approval from licensing, I shouldn't show you any of the new stuff. There's a new rendering tech that we're using on the new DLC. And I think it's taking, the interesting part about this game visually is if you play through campaign 1, which was built first, right? You look at the visual style in campaign 1, and it's kind of this highly saturated, something like maybe the cover of the box of the card game. It's like very saturated art. And then you push more into like campaign 3 by the time you get there, even Gundabad, you push more towards this in-between space of very saturated and not quite realistic. And I think the DLC kind of pushes that further into more of like a clean, I don't know, I guess to me, high fantasy is always the target. And campaign 3, maybe you got a little crazy with the 27 locations. Like, obviously we're playing cards on top of this, right? And that's what we care about. And we don't want to take away from that. And so, yeah, I think it'll be an interesting switch, but it certainly will be more performant. And we've worked on that. And so, yeah, we hope people like it. But I think it's probably a good idea if I don't show you that stuff, at least until I get license approval, which should come into this week, hopefully.
We don't need Greg getting in trouble.
Yeah. I know people are desperate to see it. Trust me, we're desperate to show it. But yeah, we still it's still so new. We're still working and we're still thinking design and gameplay. And like I said on the stream a couple of weeks back, I think, we used to show a lot to players before the DLC came out. And I don't know, obviously DLC, no matter how long we spend working on it, players will burn through it, pretty fast. So I don't want to ruin that surprise, right? To me, it's we'll talk about where it's at. We may give you some screenshots from it, but you're really just going to have to dive in and play it and have that be the first experience. I mean, it's like opening a box of cards. it doesn't do me any good to show you, hey, here's an unboxing YouTube, and you can see all the cards that are in this pack, because you're just like, okay, I don't know, you just somehow lose that experience. So we won't blow it. So I'm not sure what we'll show. I've been working on those locations. We've been working on that now for almost 2.5 weeks. The new locations. So this is Rohan, and the areas around the fields of Ison, some of those battlegrounds, and yeah, they're cool. And it really adds a lot. So we just added them to the game on, what was it, Sunday. We put them into the game. So normally we just use a dummy location as we're working through the design. And then when the art comes online, and it's pretty crazy how much of a difference it makes that you can travel to, like, it just cements that further into your mind that you're actually traveling to these different locations. And in this particular DLC, you come back through these locations multiple times. So you totally get the feeling of you're understanding the layout of what you're doing at the same time that you're playing it. So yeah, I think it's pretty cool.
Couple more questions, since we have just a bit of time. Besides the secret location, and without giving anything away, are there any secret things players still haven't discovered from the whole of the product thus far?
Again, I don't know. That would be a question for Alex. Obviously, I'm sure there's probably some things in there. Like any developer, is going to put things in there. The thing is whether people find those, as far as, are they as big as Campaign 3? Not that I know of. But again, like I said, before I managed all the art and the art side of the house. And so, we were a small studio, 10 people, right? So we had 2 QA people, 3 designers, and 2 devs, which is me and Devin. And a producer, Charlie, who did most of the narrative stuff. So, and Tim, helped out with the design and, overall direction of the game. So there could be stuff throughout there, that people have found or not found. I don't know if they're as big as the one in Campaign 3. That was a pretty big surprise, but, who knows?
And I think our friend Twit here kind of answered this for us, but will the new content updates and release around the same time for all platforms, or will PC get it first, then console later?
So our intention is always that all platforms come out at the same time. However, there's some logic behind that actually works against console players. And the reason for that is that if we could release on Steam tomorrow, if we got licensing approval, we could put it out on Steam tomorrow, but we're still probably on our schedule at least 6 to 8 weeks away from a console approval. But here's the thing is, once you run through console, that's it. So it takes 6 weeks to get it through there. You don't want bugs, you don't want issues, you don't want any of that stuff on your console build, because then you're going to have to wait to the next console build to get those fixed. So if you're on the current PS4 build, there's an image problem that somehow made it through QA in the deck builder. And so you see the deck builder switching images around. And so had that come out on PC first, maybe it did, I don't remember. But I'll say this, our intention is always to release it at the same time. Do I think content will release that way on this first DLC? I would guess probably not. I would say probably, obviously we have to run this through the system, but my suggestion would be that we release it at least 2 weeks or so early on PC. Let it go through those bug fixing problems, find any issues that are out there that players are going to find, and make sure that those are buttoned up for the console release so that we only have to go through that release once. And then once it's greenlit on console, which may be 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks later, people have to wait for that content. I understand, but it's you don't want bugs to be missed that could have been fixed, because now you're going to have to wait 3 months till you can get another console build while it's there. So I totally get it. As a console player, you want to have that first access to, you don't want any spoilers or anything coming from the PC side. And we're trying to do some vaccines testing to try to prevent that now. Whether we wait to release on PC until everything is through console release, I don't know. We'll just have to see and talk with the team and figure out where it's at, and if we feel strong enough that way. I just know I don't want to build going out to console that isn't solid, right? And doesn't have as many of those things fixed as they can be. So yeah, I guess that's a long answer. Yes, I would hope they all ship the same, but just the realistic dev push of what you need to do to get it to Steam. Like we can push a button and it can be on Steam. We can fix 20 bugs and have them turned around in a day and back on Steam. And then like, okay, yep, that build is played for a week and things are solid, no other issues. Submit the final console build, have them green light it, and then we can go to console. That's how realistically it's going to work. But obviously, I would hope it goes live on all those platforms at the same time. But who knows? We'll see.
Okay, we'll do one more question just because we're coming up to the end of the time here. The last one was, is there a possibility to updating current card backs with new visuals, such as giving the Mount Doom card a burnt edge visual, or would that be something out of your control with older content?
No, I know the users on the Discord, I think it was Twit, like somebody's been putting some serious effort into like putting some ideas forward about how to get old card art that was, maybe, something that was included as an early backer reward. How do you still keep that reward, but then, give people access to the content? Like, I don't know exactly if we're going to do that, but my hope is that we come out with a ton of cosmetics, like a ton of card backs, like a ton of the icons. Like there's still a ton of art that we can put in there that can be like your user badge, things that we don't have. There's a lot of card art we have for alternate art as well. That is a lot, sometimes better than the art that we have in the game for the cards. So I think that's great to be able to customize your deck and your cards specifically with your card back. And yeah, I would love to see some of that content, because like if you were a backer of the early backer and you didn't get the Sauron card, the one ring, or I can't remember what we called it, the forging ring, like it's like the coolest background there. I know because I made it. But like it's awesome, like the way it lights up, and when he passes, it goes to dark. But even if you backed it and you bought it again on the Switch, like that card back isn't on the Switch. So yeah, we'll have to look at that. I don't know if exactly, like obviously if they were an early backer, they got that reward and that was part of being part of the game, but it wasn't available on console. So I know like as a user, if you came into the game late and you see that, like obviously you hope that you can somehow get access to that. So obviously those are things we're looking at in the future. Maybe first quarter, second quarter, we can come out with a bunch of those. The DLC will come out with card backs for a Sauron card back and a player card back that will be unique to those DLCs. And obviously we'll be announcing more about that soon. But yeah, my hope is to have as many of those cosmetics in the game as possible, while still making sure that, if you were an early backer, then, but I think the idea presented on Discord is a pretty smart one, but obviously we'd have to throw it to the community and see what they thought. And then we have to do the work of getting all those card backs into the game and making sure that they work. But yeah, you guys should check out the Discord channel. There's a good conversation, I think, going on around that. Twit had some good ideas. So yeah, obviously we're throwing all that stuff on the board because we're buried under other stuff, bug fixing and making sure this release gets out as early as we can. But yeah, we're definitely taking those things into consideration. More customization, the better, for sure.
Awesome. Everybody, there's still more questions coming in, but I want to let Greg get back to making the game for you. So, but we do want to thank Greg for showing us all of this really cool stuff. I think it was really great for everybody to see how exactly everything's made, how much work actually goes into it. And thanks for giving us your time today.
Yep, and we're kind of like, as you guys have other ideas, feel free to drop on Sarah. And obviously, if we can get to them, like maybe once the DLC pack comes out, we can go through. Like, obviously, I don't want to, it'll be a while before people get all the way through it and play it, but then maybe we can just revisit it and talk about some of the new things. Even as if we do switch to new platforms or we push in those directions, that we can have the other team members on as well, kind of talking about, what they did to optimize this, or, what we think about when we're doing balancing for different difficulty levels, just as an open discussion for people who have questions about the game or might like to see some things. Hopefully this is useful, provides something, other than gameplay, something that's still interested, and you guys know how much work and love we put into this game. And hopefully, we can just keep building that. Hopefully it's not just me talking about all this stuff. Here's Greg to talk about design. Here's Greg to talk about art. And
But the
we'll get
wonderful
some
thing
good
is, Greg, you don't just yes or no answers. You're very thorough, and I think that's very much appreciated by a lot of people. A lot of transparency from you, so that's good. So with that, like I said, I'll let Greg get back to it. There will be opportunities again in the future for you to ask more questions for Greg. It's just we gotta keep things moving for him. So again, Greg, thank you for joining us. And everybody, thank you for joining the streams. Thank you for your questions and your interest and your feedback. Greg did put together some what's the word I'm looking at? Desktop images for you. They are in the YouTube doobly-doo down below. I'm also going to put them up on Discord and Facebook and all of those fun things. Just some art goodies for you to enjoy. So thanks, Greg, for that as well. So I look forward to talking to you all again on Thursday for more multiplayer. So get excited, because I know I am. Thank you, everybody. And like I said, any more questions, hit us up on all of the various channels, and we'll try to get those answered for you. And look forward to hanging out again. Enjoy your rest of your day and your Wednesday. Bye, everybody.